Um, Good morning, Chair Parks, members of the board, Mr. Powers. The Federal Drug Administration approved the Pfizer vaccine for 12 to 15-year-olds yesterday afternoon. As you know, this vaccine has been shown to be 95% effective for people 16 years of age and older. This trials in kids 12 to 15 years of age showed that it was 100% effective, which is, we just don't see vaccines that have that kind of efficacy. The chief side effect in these kids was fever in 20%, but there were no serious side effects. The FDA approval now moves on to an arm of the Center for Disease Control called the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, the ACIP. And that will happen tomorrow. If approved by the ACIP, the Western States Scientific Group will look at this information on Thursday or Friday. And so we might get final approval to use this vaccine in kids 12 to 15 as early as Thursday or Friday of this week. Ventura County sites could begin, therefore, administering this vaccine at any time after that. Now, there is a statement that probably will come out tomorrow from the state about this vaccine and its usage. So that could influence the implementation of vaccination of kids in this age group. As Barry Zimmerman pointed out, children will need to come to the site, wherever it is, with a parent or a guardian, or they can come with a note that will be corroborated with a FaceTime call that speaks directly with the parent or guardian. Next slide, please. So why vaccinate children? The common belief is that children don't get sick from COVID. And it is true that the significant majority of children who do get COVID have no symptoms. But there are children who have mild illness. And when it comes to serious illness, about 1.3% of all kids that get COVID are hospitalized. And half of those have some kind of significant respiratory disease. 10% of infants under a year of age have severe disease when they get COVID. And that's compared with 3% of teens over the age of 15. So 3% of teens will get serious disease with COVID. There are downstream complications of COVID, whether a child has these symptoms or not. Totally asymptomatic children can get long haulers, COVID long haulers disease. And remember, it can leave somebody either for a short term or maybe for a longer period of time with brain fog, fatigue, headaches, dizziness, and shortness of breath. And then when it comes to even more serious complications, death occurs in 0.01% of kids who get COVID. And so that's at least 350 childhood deaths in the United States due to COVID. And then post-COVID multisystem inflammatory syndrome also occurs in 0.01%. And we have recorded 3,185 cases as of last week of this syndrome, with 36 deaths associated with it. And this syndrome of what's called MISC, M-I-S-C, has inflammation of blood vessels, damage to heart and kidneys. These can be long-lasting. So there are other reasons for children to get this besides the threat to themselves, and that is to protect others. It's, I think, really important to protect the infants in your household, elders, people with comorbidities that children are exposed to. Even if they don't have symptoms, they can carry the virus for a while. And then more public activities will be available to children who are vaccinated. I think there are amusement parks that require this, professional baseball games, foreign travel will require this in many cases. And then it's important to play a role in preventing another surge of COVID disease and decreasing the opportunity for COVID variants to develop. Because if there are fewer people with COVID, then the opportunity to move from a person to person and mutate is limited. And so we can keep businesses open for both of these reasons, that we're preventing another surge and we're decreasing variants from developing. And some might argue the most important reason is so that children can hug and kiss their grandparents without concern of putting them at risk. Next slide, please. So vaccines are intended to be and needed to be in private physicians' offices. And in some sense, this slide is aimed at private physicians. But everyone out here who can influence a private physician and encourage them to carry the vaccine in their office, like all other vaccines are carried in their offices, that would be appreciated, so that I think Supervisor Levin's point is true. There's a lot of confidence that people have in their physicians. And so we're relying on our physicians to give this vaccine. There's going to be a webinar by the California Medical Association today, later this afternoon. And I think anybody who knows a physician can write this down. I think it would be good. They can either attend this, and this, incidentally, this webinar is intended for pediatricians, but I think any physician can listen into this and can take advantage of this and sign up to do this. It's going to be recorded and it's going to be posted on eziz.org/COVID. That's eziz.org/COVID. And we'd love to see physicians either attend this or later on go back and review this, because it is due to an abbreviation that the CDC has now made in its sign-up process. So it might only require 1 hour, but certainly no more than 3 hours, for a physician to sign his or her office up to be able to give vaccinations. The state has said that it will approve these sign-ups, assuming that there's the appropriate knowledge that the physician has, the appropriate refrigeration and freezer that the physician has. And this does not take an extraordinary type of freezer beyond the kind that is already being used by physicians' offices for the other immunizations, and that this turnaround by the state for approval will be within 24 hours. Doctors, therefore, might be able to order, theoretically and hopefully, this vaccine next Tuesday or Wednesday, and should be able to give it. It should be in their refrigerators and freezers by the end of next week. So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Levin. Pause and see if there's any questions.
Supervisor Long, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Levin, I've been contacted by some school principals and so forth requesting this information, so thank you very much. I would just ask, I'm sure it's happening, is just to make sure that our school districts are up in the loop of this information as their parents are going directly to schools in regards to, do they need vaccines to get into the schools? All those different questions that parents ask. I think this information for our school districts will be very important as we roll out any availability from 12 to 15. So maybe if you could just let us know what the outreach to our school districts are, that'd be great. Thank you.
We have communicated, Mr. Vargas and I have spoken with the superintendent of schools, and he is in communication with the schools, and we are willing to go to significant lengths to bring vaccine to schools if necessary, or to find ways of bringing schools to sites that we can establish. And when these kinds of vaccination events occur, it will not be limited simply to the students, but any parents or guardians or anybody else that comes with these kids will be able to be vaccinated as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I also heard there's no way you can get on a cruise ship unless you've been vaccinated, is the way they're going forward. So that there are definitely some things that will require vaccinations that people will maybe encouraged to get vaccinated for, if not for wanting to spread the disease and to actually be able to end it. Because once we eliminate the ability to spread it, we'll have less of the virulent extensions of it. So one of the thoughts I'm having too, as we look at our Board of Supervisors and coming back into session, I was looking at the City of Los Angeles. Their City Council is planning on coming back into a session in person, I believe in June, probably around that June 15th date. And then that they are asking that all their council members be vaccinated. They'll bring the public in at a later date, I think, once COVID is even more on that too.
I think that is what I'm hearing from many parts of the state, that same kind of progression. Of course, all of this is going to be subject to how we're doing our rates of vaccination. If we see another surge, I'm optimistic that we won't see another surge. And if we do, it won't be anywhere near to the extent that the last one was, just because of how widespread vaccines becoming in our county.
And do we have an understanding of, and it's a tough question, but the how long those vaccines will be good for? We have some experience, I guess, with the flu vaccines.
Yeah, we don't know. And actually, Supervisor, the flu vaccine is kind of an exception in that we require another one every year. And the immunity from the flu vaccine seems to wane after about 6 or 7 or 8 months, whereas other vaccines that we get last a lifetime. And so I think indications are so far with this vaccine that we're seeing a really good, solid immunity from it, and we're seeing it endure, at least for the duration of what we've seen with this since December. So hopefully that means that we're going to see at least a solid year and maybe longer.
Thank you. Supervisor Ramirez?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Levin. I have, I have some acquaintances who've just traveled internationally, and it was quite complicated to be able to get on a plane and then come back, and costly if they didn't. They were all double vaccinated, but that's the kind of thing that I think people do love to travel. Right now, it's not really easy to go anywhere or even advisable out of country, even to some states. And I do know someone who was, although vaccine hesitant, decided to get vaccinated to be able to go to a Dodger game. So that's quite an incentive. One of my concerns about opening up the building and all of the facilities to the public is that, I'm vaccinated. I don't know. I haven't asked. Not my business. Who else is vaccinated on the board? People can say if they want to, but I do know people who are not able to get vaccinated for justifiable medical reasons, and I am concerned about our staff and people who may be unable to get the vaccine. I don't think it's a lot of people, but a few, and then of course there are people who do not want it, and I'm just concerned about opening the facility to people who might not be able to get vaccinated, not want to get vaccinated, and endanger county functions. I know at Oxnard, when I was there was a very important protocol to protect the staff who we need the staff to be safe, the first responders, even people work in our water department, basic services to be protected so they don't become sick with COVID and not able to do their job. So that's one of my concerns that I've expressed to CEO Powers and others about opening too quickly and perhaps endangering some of our staff members and county functions.
And I'm aware of that, and I share that concern.
Yes, and I also, that is why I insisted that we go to Zoom specifically, even though we weren't having the public, having staff be there for, having that close interaction of staff, is a concern, and not wearing masks at that time too. So I think what the city of Los Angeles is doing is they're having a council member and one of their staff are allowed in, and they have to be vaccinated, and that's how they're handling that situation. So I think there are ways that we can do it, and I think it's a good phasing in towards allowing everyone in eventually. Supervisor Long, would you like to go ahead?
I saw Mike Powers' hand. I was going to let him go before me.
Thank you, Supervisor. If I may, Chair Parks and Supervisor Ramirez, just to respond to those concerns, absolutely, the safety of our staff is a priority. And so that's why we're taking the approach of a phased, gradual approach while still observing public health protocols like masking and so forth. So definitely continue to be very thoughtful and careful as we go forward. Thank you.
And it's also wonderful to have test kits available too, so people can get tested, so and that's being used a lot too.
Absolutely, great point. Thank you.
Well, and along with that, Dr. Levin, I would appreciate maybe some of your information in regards to what Supervisor Ramirez was talking about. There's those that choose for whatever reason not to get vaccinated. And I want to make sure that we're able to still hear presentations from them, still have the public outreach. And even though you're vaccinated, is that 100% that you're never going to get COVID? I don't think so. So is it a test as the door, certain parameters that we need to follow to make sure that we continue to keep people safe, as safe as we can. And so I appreciate that. I know that Supervisor Parks, I respect the decision you made to make sure that we all went through Zoom. And as we open up, I want to make sure that we're looking at all the aspects of everything. So thank you.
And what's nice is that we can always have Zoom available for people who don't want to be at the meeting, and including the public and all. So there are some rays of good light that we've gotten from COVID, and that's one of them, that we have this new ability to get further access from the public who may not be able to come to the boardroom. And then also, I'm sure Dr. Levin, the fact that while it may be 95% effective, that it reduces the symptoms, right? If you are vaccinated, and that's a big plus.
Yeah, 95% effective, but that was associated with no hospitalizations and no deaths.
Okay, and no other comments from supervisors. Back to you, Mr. Powers.
Thank you, Chair Parks. Next, we'll go hear from our EO Community Liaison, Rosa Gonzalez, on our focused equity efforts. Thank you. Next slide, please.